Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Lant, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre.
Hello and welcome to Health Oddity episode 25. Today we are one man down. We are trying to track him. Hopefully he will join us at some stage. But Mr. Paul Bassett is not in the house. But I will say hello to Mr. Peter Lant.
Hello. How are we doing?
I am very good, thank you. Very good indeed. And we have a very special guest who I will introduce in a second. But I'll just ask him to say hello first, Mr. Phil McDougall.
Hello.
A man of mystery, Yeah. Cool. So we've got Phil with us now. Phil is a very special guest for our 25th episode. I have known Phil for, I would think, at least 6 or 7 years. I have done numerous courses and certifications where Phil has been teaching and instructing, and I've also hosted Phil a few times at Unique Results where he's came and done mace workshops and Indian club workshops. I've also got his bent press manual that he wrote, and I follow him. And if you don't follow Phil on Instagram and social media, I'd highly recommend you do. He's a very, very interesting guy, so I will not give too much away. I will ask Phil in a second to kind of introduce himself really and just tell us where he is at the moment. He's done a lot of traveling recently. He's had a very interesting life, and he's a very, very well experienced and intelligent trainer who I'm sure we're going to get a lot from today. So over to you, Phil. If you'd like to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, where you are now, how you got there, and what you're doing and how you're living your life at the moment.
Well, that was an amazing introduction. Thank you very much. I'm currently in Marin County, which is the county directly north of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. I moved here a year ago from San Diego. I was in San Diego for 3.5 years. Prior to that, London. Currently I am most of my work, or I'd say income-wise, it's about 60% personal training, 40% remote coaching, and that doesn't leave any percentage for corporate gigs as well. So I do corporate wellness gigs. Like the Zoom's been great, just jumping on people's Zoom calls, incorporating movement snacks into corporate calls, which has been a lot of fun. So yeah, how did I get here? Is that sorry, I forgot the order of the order. Yeah. I think brief background, I suppose. Left the Royal Marine Commandos in 2011. When you leave the Royal Marines, you pretty much become one of two things: either a trainer or you go into security services. Security services doesn't really have much longevity because you can only kind of do it for a few years and then inevitably end up becoming a trainer anyway. So went straight into becoming a sports massage therapist and trainer, working mostly as a sports massage therapist in London. Built up a pretty decent client base after probably, I'd say that the first year of becoming a trainer and therapist in London was probably the hardest working year of my life. I would rather go through Royal Marines basic training 3 more times than start personal training from scratch.
I think we all relate to that. I've never done Royal Marines basic.
Somebody got in touch with me on LinkedIn the other day asking me, so he's quite a successful guy in a different business, and he got in touch with me asking me for the path to take in order to become a successful trainer. And I pretty much just like I wasn't particularly encouraging. Looking back on it, I pretty much said, be prepared for paying your dues in this industry is probably harder than most other industries in terms of the tiny amount of income versus the massive amount of work to begin with. Anyway, so yeah, it was a few hard years in London. Hey, Paul.
Woo. Hey, sorry.
We have Mr. Paul Bassett with us.
Thank God for that. We thought,
have I got the time wrong?
Yeah, it was 20 minutes ago, mate. But anyway.
Was it? I thought I had it down for 3 p.m. I'm so sorry, Phil.
Well, you're still late.
Yeah, so then started getting in. I was already using kettlebells and had already learned in clubs with my time in the Royal Marines. But training philosophies changed a great deal within the Royal Marines. The general attitude, and I was actually mentioned this earlier. I was actually we were told this by a physical training instructor: unless you almost kill yourself in the process, there is no point in doing exercise. I can kind of in his defense, he's training young men to go and fight in war, where you kind of have to pretty much push yourself to the limits. But taking that training philosophy for everyday training is just so harmful. And that's why anybody that's had a long military career, any soldier I've ever worked with, they've got so many injuries just because you've got that philosophy of go hard or go home mixed with like maybe bad training habits, and it's just a recipe for disaster. So then during that 8 years in London, philosophy's changed a lot. I think a huge part of that is to do with attending Strong First courses, doing FMS. I mean, I probably spent best part of 30 grand on education during that time. And yeah, the Strong First, looking back, that's probably the biggest turning point in, okay. And just really loving the way that, movement is such a strong part of the whole system. So then, moving on then, basically had enough of London and just the constant grind. So up and left with my American wife to San Diego. And basically
the home of the personal trainer, as we were saying earlier.
Indeed, yeah. San Diego's absolutely full of highly experienced, knowledgeable fitness people, but because the whole city is so fit, not many people require or want personal trainers. So it's pretty hard as a trainer to make a living in San Diego. It was a bit of a struggle for 3 years, but I was lucky enough to be in a job where I was traveling internationally teaching clubs, teaching mates, teaching kettlebells, teaching training philosophies, assessments, all that good stuff. And then moved to San Francisco a year ago, or Marin, and just gone back to being a very busy trainer again.
So are you trying to say that everyone in San Francisco is massive then? Is that what you're saying? In San Diego, everyone's fit, so it's hard to make money in that. So you move to San Francisco because everyone's out of shape.
I think what it's down to, you might think that. I think what it actually comes down to is what's the most valuable resource in places where time is the most valuable resource. So London, everyone's short on time, but money, no problem. Chicago, everyone's short on time. New York, any big metropolitan city where everyone's just so busy all the time, no problem with giving out the money for personal training, right? Versus San Diego, everyone just goes there to relax. Time is, in the attitude in San Diego is, if you don't have tons of spare time, you're a loser because you don't have your priorities right. So, people have tons of time, not enough money because they're hanging out on the beach too much. So yeah, personal training doesn't work down there. But yeah,
that sounds all right to me.
I was just going to say, Phil, I think I've seen as well, since you've been in San Francisco, you've connected again more with, well, I certainly see you out doing a lot of cycling, doing a lot of, you know, I've seen the pictures. I think I shared it with you, you know, with the Golden Gate Bridge behind you, with your bike up in your hand, and, you know, on the bikes and things. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the cycling here is epic. You've got the swimming. A few people I know here swim out to Alcatraz regularly. Pretty cold and full of currents and a few sharks here and there. But
I was going to say, they're not like sharks kicking about around there.
Yeah,
that's pretty hardcore.
A huge great white breeding zone just on the ocean side of the bridge.
So when people are out swimming, they go, well, them great whites, they're only like this big. You go, no, they're the baby ones. You want to watch out for that because the mother will be over there.
I think a lot of that comes with just knowledge, because a great white doesn't actually care about eating you. And I think, having swum in the ocean hundreds of times now in California where there's great whites around, you know, getting over that and just trying to like understand great whites, you kind of, the fear goes with more understanding, you know, and just the knowledge that they don't actually eat you. At worst, they'll come along and just they'll feel you to see, and they'll explore you with their mouth. Obviously I haven't been eaten, but you know, this is the way that I overcome the fear. You know, just the knowledge that they're only interested in fatty seals. They don't care about humans. They'll just come along, explore you with their mouth, and then go away. So this whole great white shark bite, that's the worst that will happen. It's just a bite and then off they go.
There's just like a small bite, yeah, a little.
Well, yeah.
I'll remember that. I remember that when
like I say, it's overcoming fears, and I was definitely afraid for about the first year of swimming in the ocean.
It's Steven Spielberg's fault. That's it is, isn't it? Because he gave the great white shark a bad name. I mean, come on. In about how many films? 4 or 5?
Yeah, I remember the 4th one was Michael Caine, wasn't it? So I don't know.
Yeah, there's that famous quote, isn't it, when they said it was a rubbish film? He goes, "Yeah, but look at the house it brought me over there."
So Phil, would you mind kind of explaining to our listeners your own kind of training? How, I know we've spoke about it previously, how you used to train, like when you were a young stud, if you like, in your 20s and in the Marines and that sort of thing, and then how your training philosophy for your own training has then changed as you've got older, and then probably, well, definitely influenced how you now, work with your own clients at the moment.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest influences for me have probably come from Steve Maxwell and Steve Cotter, and basically trainers who have been in the industry for decades and who move better than most people in their 20s. And, you look at like 80, 90-year-old Tai Chi masters who are still moving so well, and the penny drops that movement is key. And you look at commonalities, and the common denominator between all of these people I look up to in health and fitness, they all move their joints to their end ranges of movement every day. It's like a daily practice. So prioritizing movement as the number one is up there. Something that I think one of the most important things when it comes to helping anybody with health and fitness is establishing their foundation first. And this is like the really unsexy stuff. And these are like the absolute pillars. And I'll just mention, I went through a phase a few years ago of asking all of the medical professionals I know, which was quite a lot at the time when I was back in San Diego, if everybody in your community ticked all of these boxes, how many patients would you have? And all of them said they'd be out of business. So breathing. Do you breathe with your diaphragm, or are you a chest breather? Breath with the diaphragm means the stability muscles throughout the body, or stability throughout the body, works, and stress is low. And I won't go into the millions of benefits of proper breath. Hydration. Are you hydrated? Water is the life source. We're mostly made of water. Everything changes when you're hydrated. Blood volume, blood viscosity, all bodily functions. Diet. You obviously can't cover diet in a couple of sentences, but basically, do you just not eat processed crap? And do you have like an anti-inflammatory diet? Movement. And when I say movement, that comes in two forms. One, walking and locomotion. So do you walk? I want to say 10,000 steps a day, but as soon as you give it a number, if somebody's way off that number, then all of a sudden it's like this thing that they can't manage. So depends where somebody's at, and you're trying to coach them to get from A to B. But to begin with, I'll just say, can you at least just go for a 15-minute walk? Humans are, we're humans because we can locomote from A to B. That's one of the key differences between us and apes is we grew a glute medius. We can balance on one foot, and we're actually able to locomote on two legs. And as soon as you take locomotion out of the equation for any humans, like everything goes down. The whole way our body works are all designed around the contralateral or oblique slings across the body that help us locomote. Locomotion is the main movement pattern and should come above all of the others, including, I've developed quite a low opinion of traditional gym exercises such as squats. It's like a little bit of a tangent here. I'll go back to the pillars of health in a second, but if you ask most trainers what are like the best exercises that people should be doing, squats are normally on that list. I'm like, well, can you go your entire life and live a really healthy life without lifting anything in a squat pattern? Of course you can. Is the squat pattern useful to be able to sit into the natural human sitting position? Absolutely. But is there benefit on all of these people in the Western world who literally can't even visit that position, loading them up and blasting them for reps? No, it's just injures people. Anyway, so back to the
we'll maybe go back to we'll come back to that later on and kind of cover off some sort of your kind of movement philosophies versus traditional kind of strength training type thing. Come back to that.
For sure. There's so many litmus tests, that I'd love to get into. But anyway, so movement being one of the pillars of health, that's split into locomotion, and the other one is just joint movement. And the question is, do you move most of the joints in your body through their full range of motion every day? And like people are like, every day? It's like, yeah, it takes, if you learn a sequence that you can actually break the body down into bits, and you can make this lovely feeling movement flow that takes about 20 minutes to do it thoroughly, ideally 30. You can do a really good job in 30 minutes of literally moving every single joint through its end range several times, lubing up every single joint in the body, going through its maximum range actively versus passively. And so do you do that every day? So that's like the physical side of things when it comes to health and longevity. And something that I learned in San Diego, I'd say this was kind of massive for me, is now a coming from the UK, we're a little bit afraid to show our emotions in we really are. It's like like you come over to the States and everyone's like so unafraid, like and emotional, and like especially in Southern California where everyone's very huggy. But up in Northern California where I am now, like, well, obviously it's COVID, so you don't do that anyway, but people are more like handshaky and standoffish. Southern California, everyone's like big hugs and legs around and everything. But yeah, Southern California, very spiritual. But anyway, I was backing up a little bit, but back in London, I was suffering from quite bad stress, and moving to Southern California, a good friend taught me the power of gratitude. And now, if my younger Marine self would have heard me now, I'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, but really, like, if you know, have you heard of Josephina?
Yes, yeah.
And you can look into, slight side story now. So every cell in our body has a frequency, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everything vibrates at a certain frequency. Now, they've actually measured, because I only respond well to things I know and to science, and I'm not religious in the slightest. And if anyone starts talking to me about ghosts or spirits, I'm like, yeah, whatever. So when somebody tells me that being grateful helps you physically, I'm like, I need to know, I need to understand why. So here's the why. Everything has a vibration. They've measured the brain waves that come out of your head if you're in different moods, right? The brain waves that come out that come out when you're angry, or when you are pissed off, or when you hate something, the hate brain waves are the same cellular frequency as cancer cells. It's like, okay, wow, that's like, okay, that's pretty awesome to know. So, and then you take the brain waves of gratitude and love and all the positive attitudes, and they're completely away from the cancer cells, completely different frequency. It's like, okay. So a little trick that a friend of mine, a good friend in San Diego, Ryan Steenrod, he does, and I've instilled this habit, and it's changed my life, is every single day you talk to whoever you live with about what is the best thing that happened to you that day. And it just, all you do is, just because that one thing is on your mind, then if you were to ask most people how the last month was, especially now during COVID, right? How was the last month? Like, what happened to you last week? The only things, the very first things that are on people's minds are all the negatives, because people dwell on the negatives, right? However, if every single day you're taking 30 seconds out of your day and actually reflecting and thinking what the best things that happened to you that day are, it's amazing how then that translates into the last week. What happened to you last week? And all of these amazing things come into your mind. What happened to you last month? Oh, last month was great because I did this, 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 and this. So like the perspective of your own life changes from this, like as Royal Marines, you complain all the time. Yeah, go on, sorry, Pete.
I love that, because I've spoke about this before. There's two things here. The first one is, have you ever seen the Kelly McGonigal video? The YouTube, she did a not YouTube video, TEDx. She did a TED talk about how the very thought that stress is bad for you can make stress bad for you. Whereas if you know how some people deal with stress as stress, and some people deal with it as like something to come, an excitement. So your body reacts in a different way. So if you're stressed, your arteries close up and everything, and it kind of looks like, looks like you're about to have a heart attack. As opposed to if you get excited about stress, it actually creates excitement in your body, and it's a totally different, a different perspective. So the very thought of the very thought that stress can be bad for you can actually kill you and can cause cancer and all that. So it sounds like a similar sort of thing. But also what I do with most of the people who I work with is, we've spoke about this before, and there was one lady in particular, and I said, like, I get them to write down 3 wins a day. 3 a day. And when they say, I can't think of any, I'm like, yes, you can. There's got to be, even if you've had the worst day, you've got through it. That's a win, right? You know what I mean? Yeah. But what I do is get them to write it down, then say why it was a win. What was your win? Why was it a win? What's the next step? What are you going to do about it? And then what is the specific thing that you're going to do, like tomorrow or next week or whatever? Like, schedule it and make this thing that you've done well, work well for you throughout. And then it builds this momentum of what you've just been talking about, of well-being. Yeah. Because like you say to people, like you said, especially now, how's your week going? How's it? Oh, this happened. Oh, do you remember that thing that happened? That was good. Oh, I forgot about that. Because this lady who I train, I remember once speaking to her, and she said, this happened this week. This happened. There's another thing to add to my list of failures. I was like, you're not meant to be making a list of failures. You're meant to be making a list of wins. And people tend to be able to focus on the negative quite easily. And it's astonishing. And when you do like what you do, and I've been doing, I think we've all been doing it. And especially over the last year, I know James certainly has, and sort of reining things in and focusing on yourself and the family more and all of that. And I've been doing that for a few years. And it's been great. It just changes your perspective on everything and things. I mean, things still stress you out and what have you, but it totally, it just makes everything a little bit more bearable, for want of a better word. So I totally agree with that. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, especially now in COVID. Like to be honest, the only thing with me is the last month I've just felt really bored, to be honest. But I think you just got to look at the bigger picture. There's so many worse things that could be going on. You look at like world news or world history, just like this isn't bad really, and you just got to keep yourself entertained and keep looking at the positives, for sure.
What's the situation for you out in San Francisco right now? I mean, are you in any kind of lockdown out there at the moment? Are gyms shut? Or shops shut? Or are things opening back up there now? Or
so all the gyms and restaurants are officially closed, but they've all taken their business outdoors. So you'll drive past the local gym and they've pretty much just set up the whole gym in the car park. So you've got everything. You've got like all of the equipment that's inside is just out in the car park. And then on the streets, all the restaurants have basically just taken parts of the road, and everyone's just dining out on the street. So I guess it's good because here it doesn't rain that often, so it kind of works. Everywhere you go though, there's closed, boarded up shops. Even like San Francisco is really bad with crime and homeless. So like local delis are all closing, and just because they're just getting robbed and ransacked all the time. But here in Marin, it's one of the lowest areas of crime in the whole of California, which is odd because we're so close. It's amazing. It just
is that because Dirty Harry sorted it all out?
Well, maybe
that was where Dirty Harry was. Great.
Yeah, maybe he moved over the bridge and he's
he retired over the bridge with his massive Magnum 44, just sitting there, like, don't mess with me.
I think Paul would like to say something. Sorry, Paul, he's been leaning in.
Oh, no, it's okay. No, I'm listening. Sorry, firstly, I've right messed up the time today. That's a good time management. I'm all going on about time management, and then I'm turning up late. Right. Sorry about that, Phil.
No.
I mean, I don't know what you guys were talking about right at the beginning, but Phil was one of the first people that I kind of really got talking to about how to progress my own fitness. And Phil was really kind to give me loads of advice throughout not only my career, but just to get me started. And so thanks for that, Phil. But you've always explored movement, and that's always been really interesting to watch. You've always kind of soaked in so many influences, and you've obviously been able to express them physically as well. So, you have a high level of capability. But where are you leaning at the moment? How are you condensing all of that into something when you've got an hour with a client and a client's saying, look, as you mentioned, we're in a time poor world. We're also in a very highly stressed. So along with those time poor individuals, you have very highly stressed people. And Dan John last week or the week before was talking about, sometimes you give them what they need, not what they want. But at the same time, to keep a client, you have to kind of provide a certain amount of entertainment. So what are you doing at the moment to condense all these things you've been exploring, from clubs through to kettlebell work to whatever you're currently kind of exploring?
Okay, so to start with any and all clients, I make sure that all of the foundation is in place first. Having been in the industry, I say for so long, only a decade since I left the Marines, but I've reached the stage where unless somebody actually cares about making their life better at 80, like if somebody only has a short-term, I want to get ripped for my wedding goal, to be honest, I've reached a stage where, I'm not your trainer. If you care about movement and you want to become a stronger human and you want your life to be better at 80, I can help you. So to begin with, I to a certain degree, I choose my audience. So the selling is less, and I don't need to satisfy their wants, because their wants are, so their subjective goals are much closer to what your average is. I think that the older that people get, the closer what you think they need versus what they think they need becomes closer and closer and closer. Like, how many 60 or 70-year-olds do you train where they go, oh yeah, I just want to move a little bit better and be able to pick things up, and it's like, perfect, exactly what I think you should do too. Versus, how many 20-somethings come along and say, yeah, I just want to, move better and be able to pick things up without worrying about injury. It's like, that never happens.
Because I've been watching lots of parkour videos. I just got addicted to them recently. I would love to do parkour, but I know I'll kill myself.
Somebody, there's a parkour guy on Netflix, Instagram, commented on one of my things. I was in the bottom of a squat, just doing like a rotation. And next to my doorstop, it looks like I'm pooing out a penguin. But anyway, and he commented on it, and he said, I need to do lots more mobility if I'm, he'd only just started following me, and he was like, I need to start thinking about lots more mobility if I want to be carrying on doing parkour for the next 10 years, because I need to be springy in that. And I was like, I kind of just commented back with like, yes, that would be a good idea. If you're jumping around all over the place, like, you need to be mobile.
Yeah. But yeah, I'll start selling the idea of mobility as a priority, excuse me, as a priority from the start, and even start tying in water coaching. Sorry, excuse me. Something in my throat. Water coaching habits, so how to get people to drink more water and that sort of thing. And when they can actually feel themselves moving better, and constantly assessing, putting people in, so I will start every single personal training session I ever do, and I'm always surprised when I also coach some trainers, as I have some pretty good coaches as my clients for my remote coaching platform, and so I get to kind of have a look in to see what other coaches do, and it's something that I've done for the last 10 years. I don't know how many personal training sessions that is over 10 years, probably more than 10,000. I don't know. Anyway, for the first 10 to 20 minutes of every single session, I take them through a guided movement flow. So that's, I'll literally do that with them. And I'm next to them. It's like a yoga class. We're opening up every single joint, and it's like this active movement flow that's on the floor or standing up. And I think that's helped my movement a hell of a lot, just getting involved in it to begin with. But I think, like, from personally having had coaching sessions as well, quite a lot myself, I don't like it when somebody's just standing there telling me what to do. If somebody's like with me, moving through something, obviously cueing me as and when they need to, but if you're just standing there, maybe with a clipboard, and somebody's rolling around in front of you, it's like, well, do it with them. They probably feel better, and they make you better as a coach anyway. It'll help your movement anyway. So yeah, I guess to answer your question, Paul, I don't really have to battle with getting people to buy in, because the people that come to me, they come to me looking for that anyway. And anybody that doesn't, I'm screening clients the same way that they're screening me, and I just won't take on somebody that I just think only cares about the way they look versus the way that they are. So yeah, you can't help you can't help people that don't want to be helped, is a lesson I've learned.
Yeah, great, fantastic.
And can you tell us a little bit, Phil, about, I know that you touched on it earlier, but for people who maybe follow you on Instagram and see you doing, training, you're obviously training outdoors a lot, in San Diego and now in San Francisco as well. And I think that people probably see you, well, 4 things that I can think of that you tend to use a lot when I see you training is kettlebells, which you mentioned, Indian clubs, mace, and like Bulgarian bags you use as well, don't you, I think?
Yeah.
You're more like, I know all those equipments are very portable, because you're obviously training outside, so you need something you can take to the park or take to the beach or whatever. What kind of led you down the route to using those implements, if you like, to train, rather than, you've already mentioned kind of not the conventional, maybe, barbell squats, barbell deadlifts, bench press, this sort of thing that a lot of people will kind of see as the bulk of training. So you've obviously got a different approach there.
Yeah, I think what led me to that is a mixture of enjoyment and understanding about the way that the human body works. With all the amount I spent on education over the years, and learning about functional mechanics and learning about stability and how the brain activates certain stabilizers over the body, and how the way that you train, if you're training several times a week and you're training in a way that doesn't apply to the way that you move in the real world, then it's basically going to take you further away from movement in the real world. So everything that I use promotes good, healthy, 3-dimensional movement in locomotive patterns, in actual human movement patterns. So one of the keys to training, so we've covered the base of water, hydration, water, sleep, blah, 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 blah. So now on to training. Train the way that you want to move. Train, look at all of the possible scenarios you could find yourself in. Do you want to pick up a baby without breaking your back? Now, you might think that in order to do that, you might have to, I don't know, I can never justify bench press. Like the bench press is probably one of the most popular exercises there is, but at no point does a human have to press themselves into a wall and lift something that is perfectly balanced with all of their strength purely focused on their chest and arms. Okay, I know an experienced bench presser uses their whole body, but you need a lot of training to build a bench press correctly. And the fact that
how are you going to get the pecs to show up on the beach, Phil? How are you going to do that?
So how would you?
And what are people going to do on a Monday if they're not doing bench press?
So this would be slightly in, say, opposition with someone like a Mark Ripto, who, for those of you who don't know Mark Ripto, he's a very well-known strength and conditioning coach. Really very, very much focuses on how you build someone very strong, and he always talks about the fundamentals being the pure strength moves like bench press, deadlifts, squats, all with barbells, mainly because they're programmable. So how would you then balance that with the interplay between movement and pure strength? How does that work for you?
Now, I know different people have different methods. I'm not knocking other people as long as they can justify it. And the key is, as long as it produces results. I personally have not met many powerlifters and people who stick to the big three who aren't riddled with injuries. I haven't ever met anybody who's done it for more than a decade and not had some debilitating back or shoulder injury that's stopped them from doing it. So I don't know. But anyway, sorry, how do I train pure strength? By so you stick to lifts that promote good movement, such as get-ups. I love get-ups. I love the bench press. Heavy mace work for training heavy grip. Front squats. If you're ever really gonna lift anything using your whole body, think lifting up a car to save something, get your superhero. Yes, I'm here. I'll help. I'll lift up the car. It's all going to happen on the front. You're never going to rest something perfectly on the back and lift it up that way. And what I love about front squats is it activates everything on the front just the way it should. You're only going to be using your hands to lift something up anyway. It's never going to be resting perfectly on the back. So you basically just train the way that you would want it. You would need to for real life situations.
So I suppose if people, just to quickly for people, if they're not watching this and they're just listening to it, Phil was kind of demonstrating, I think it was like a double kettlebell front squat, wasn't it? The position you were in. Yeah. Because obviously people, may just be listening. So not a barbell front squat, more like a double kettlebell front squat, which obviously then, and I know you're a big fan of and a big advocate of kind of offset loading as well, aren't you? And kind of different weights on both sides. So like you say, you're not perfectly balanced, you're having to resist, flexion and rotation and side flexion and everything to kind of get nice and tight. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. If you take just, let's say, like an exercise that anyone can do, let's say you got two 20-kilogram kettlebells and you're going to do something simple like a deadlift. You lift them up off the floor, you do your deadlift, and you could argue that doing 10 reps of having a pair of 20s is the same from a volume, like maths, working out the volume perspective, as doing the same number of reps with a 16 in one hand and a 24 in the other. So on paper, you've lifted the same amount for 10 reps. However, if you put two people next to each other, the one who's lifting the 16 and 24 are having a much harder time. Their nervous system is having to work a lot more because they have to fire up one side of the body in order to maintain equilibrium and a good central, strong, solid position. So yeah, as I always train with offset loads in everything, absolutely everything. All kettlebell work. So
I actually integrated that a lot with my clients, Phil, when I started seeing you do that on Instagram. And certainly before the lockdown, my clients were subjected to those workouts quite frequently, but not so much at the moment. We don't have the equipment, but it's a great exercise, and it really makes because sometimes you don't want to. It's quite easy to just kind of keep giving loads of random variety to a client because, you know, sometimes you really want to keep their interest, but you can make something very fresh by changing the offset load and just throwing it into a workout, and all of a sudden what they think they can do and what they expect from the workout radically changes because of the load.
Yeah, I find that it shows up. Or you can show up imbalances anyway, because obviously with the barbell, you've got to try and, you know, you keep the thing straight and it's rigid. But with kettlebells, they can move independently as well. So you'll see people, I used to do it with kettlebell squats, and I'd be like that, because this shoulder wasn't as, it was more mobile, but it wasn't as strong. So everything was up here in my traps. This one I could pull down. So I'm now lopsided for anyone who's not watching on YouTube. I'm lopsided. So it shows up imbalances anyway. So even if you are using the same weights either side, you're still imbalanced, and your body will just favor the side that it wants to, won't it? Unless you know better and you know you can try and manipulate your movement to favor the other side. But if you do offset and you put like a slightly heavier weight on your weaker side, say, it's then got to just work harder. Yep. Kind of automatically, you've got to figure a way. Your body will figure a way out of dealing with that.
And if you gravitate toward exercises and equipment that promote human movement, so the humans move, and there's very few occasions do we ever actually have to lift something up in the real world in a perfect straight line and then put it back down again. You know, in a real world, we're grabbing, we're reaching, we're carrying things. I love loaded carries. I mean, not just for the sake of my own training, but for the sake of helping people build stability throughout their whole body. Because all of a sudden you've mixed in the locomotive movement pattern along with various pulling and pulling exercises. Offset loaded carries, an absolute favorite. Try, for instance, holding a light to moderate kettlebell overhead with a very heavy kettlebell in a rack position. The light to moderate kettlebell overhead, yeah, you could argue it helps shoulder stability, but what it does mostly, and especially good for you and me, Paul, because we've got this slight kyphosis in our spine. The kettlebell overhead puts you in the tall spine position. So what that does is when you're holding the heavy kettlebell in the rack position, then the challenge on the torso to hold it here is absolutely phenomenal. So yeah, just doing carries in that one kettlebell overhead, one in the rack position is so good.
It's an elegant solution to people not having much equipment in lockdown, because usually people have gone and bought 2 kettlebells, an 8 kilo and a 12 kilo, or 16 and a 20. They don't have double kettlebells, you know. Yeah. So you know, and then they think, well, I can't do double cleans, double front squats, or anything like that, but they actually can maybe get a little bit more out of it than they thought.
Literally every training situation is better with offset loads. Now, I discovered it by accident because I sold all of my kettlebells when I moved to San Diego and I had to start from fresh again. I just started using offset loads because I only had one set of 8 to 48. And I was like, hang on a minute. All of the progressions that I used to do with pairs, I'm actually getting faster with offset. And then I was like, okay, then I'll start using this with clients and see if it's other people as well. And it is. Every training situation with kettlebells. Now, don't tell Kettlebell Kings this. I write for Kettlebell Kings quite often, and I'm always talking about offset loads, but so far I've not mentioned that there's no use to ever buy pairs, because then they might stop.
Did you realize this is being recorded, Phil?
I don't think they're
going to start selling left ones and right ones now, aren't they? They'll go, this one's for your left arm, this one's for your right arm, so you have to buy it there anyway.
I'll do them a favor and just I'm not sure how much of a favor it is, but I wrote this blog for Kettlebell Kings. I've written about 10 or 15 of them now, but I think one of them went viral because literally on a daily basis, I have an email from somebody somewhere in the world asking me certain questions about this blog is called How to Build Functional Mass with Kettlebells. Maybe partly was the title. It was, I must say, like, I put a lot into the blog. It was quite a good one. But still, you know, if anyone's listening and they want to understand a bit more about how to put on a bit of muscle using kettlebells, then it's all in there. All of the philosophies about the loads and the fast twitch fibers and that sort of thing. And I also go into a little bit of detail about what happens when, you know, you basically just train the big three all the time and stiffen up and lose mobility. But anyway, yeah.
What would you say? So if someone is going to train offset, would you say you need a big change, like a 16 and a 24, or could you use a 20 and a 24? Like, what do you mix it up? Do you have them like offset but not by much, or offset by like double?
Yeah.
You know, which is, I'm not going to say which is better, because, like, you know, it depends, doesn't it? But do you do a mixture of that? Would you start out with them slightly offset for someone who's not really very experienced in training offset? Would you start out slightly offset and then a bit more and ease into it like everything else?
So it depends on which muscles are going to be used, right? So I would start somebody off on only a 4 kilo difference with almost anything.
Mm-hmm.
But on the stronger lifts, like hinge patterns and squat patterns, so kettlebell swings, kettlebell snatches, kettlebell cleans, front squats, the bigger difference there, the better, and loaded carries, because that means that there's a lot more of a challenge asymmetrically. But big changes or a large difference between the two doesn't actually work with things like presses, because if you've got a 12 kilo difference and you're doing overhead, anything that involves a press, then, you know, the one is going to be so challenged and the other one not, that it doesn't really work. So anything that involves a press with offset loads, clean and press, a complex maybe involving, you know, I love throwing in presses after snatches. So anything that involves a press action, then you want to keep it to 4 to 8 kilo difference. Obviously, if with smaller humans, then you might, and if you've got 2 kilo increments, and you're working down in like the 6 to 12 kilo range, then yeah, doing less than 4 to 8 kilos would probably be useful.
Yeah.
You talk about functional.
Those are the ones you get in Argos, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We use the word function a lot, which is a very confused word for a lot of people, and it's very confused in the industry as well, ranging from people doing back squats with barbells on Bosu balls through to CrossFit, through to something like gymnastic variations or parkour, or, you know, you name it, or an exercise just being seen as functional. So how are you defining it, and where do you see the value in the exercise that you choose?
Well, just because I mentioned functional mass is muscle mass that does not diminish human movement. And when I say functional, I mean something that actually applies to real world movement. I know that functional is thrown around a lot. So instead of saying functional strength, because you've got somebody doing bicep curls on a Bosu ball, that's not functional strength. So I often change that for real world instead. So real world strength, because it just makes more difference. So to me, functional strength means strength that can be used in everyday circumstances, not just because it's got some fancy band or ball.
can it be described the same way as fitness? Because people talk about fitness, right? Are you fit? Can you run this far,
Yeah.
this fast, right? I'm not very fit at running because I don't do very much of it because I don't like it. I'm very fit at walking because I do loads of that.
There you go. Are you fit at life?
So does that mean I'm not fit? But like,
Not fit in life.
but fitness, but fitness is subjective, is it? You're fit for a purpose, and if you're fit for that purpose, you can do that thing. So everyone's better at, like, you know, you get categories of people, but some people are better at lifting stuff. Some people are better at endurance. Some people are better at whatever. So they're fit for that purpose. So can functional strength be categorized like that as well, do you think, just to make it easier for people? Because they go, I'm training functionally. Is it helping you walk better? Well, not really. I'm really knackered and tight. It's like, and do you do a lot of walking? Well, yes. Yeah. Okay. So it's not functional then. It's dysfunctional, in fact. So
yeah, this is an interesting conversation. I think we can probably go around and round depending on who you speak to, but there's Phil McDougall. I don't know if you know that.
We speak about him last week.
Famously came out with defining health and fitness to be two completely separate entities.
Yeah.
I actually think that they're more on the same page, but it all depends on how you define fitness. Because so we're just talking definitions. I think that.
Sorry, go.
I just think that fitness is, for me and anybody that I work with, how fit you are is how fit you are at longevity and how fit you are at performing your life. You know, can you carry something upstairs? Can you walk up a mountain without injuring yourself? Can you, can you live without risk? That's fitness as far as I'm concerned. So for me, health and fitness are very close. But I know that other people view fitness, it is all just a very subjective definition.
I suppose there's people who can run a marathon, but then they collapse on the line. They've got through it, but they're incredibly unhealthy process of achieving it. You know?
Yeah. I mean, it comes back to the other week when we were talking to Dan John, who obviously passed his best wishes on to you, Phil, and said to say hello. And we were talking about health. Give him a virtual hug. We were talking about health, fitness, performance, and longevity, and that kind of touches upon what we were talking about earlier with, say, powerlifting. The fact that actual performance for sport has very little to do with health, or they're not necessarily connected, because you can be very, very, you can perform very well in a sport, but your actual health, like you say, you could be the top powerlifter in the world, but 5 years after you stop powerlifting, you're broken and you can't move very well. In the same way, Dan talks about fitness as the ability to do a task, whereby you can be fit for purpose, and definitions, but you can be a cardiovascular aerobically very fit, or you can be fit to play a sport or fit to lift weights. But what you're talking about is really, sort of fit for life, isn't it? For the majority of people, we're not in performance, we're not in elite athletics or elite sport. We need to live healthy lives, long lives, and hopefully be strong. And that's certainly the vast majority of our listeners would fit into the kind of the category of definitions that you're talking about, which is great.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that everything, and this is the one thing that I took away from Steve Maxwell during a breathing workshop about 5 or 6 years ago, and I've basically stolen it and used it as my thing, is absolutely everything that you do in a training environment should be answerable to one question. Everything you eat should be answerable to the same question. Will this make you better at 80? So will this make your life better at 80? And everything from your exercise selection to how many sets and reps you're doing to the food that you decide to buy from a supermarket, absolutely everything. If you put that one question to it and the answer is no, then you don't do it. So, and I was like,
that's the thing. I mean, it's if you see those people who are in their 70s, 80s and who move really well and can still do the thing, and you're like, if you ever go up and ask them, how can you do that? How are you able to do that? They're going to go, well, I started like 40 years ago, 50 years ago, and I've been doing it my whole life. That's usually the way it goes, isn't it? Or I had an incident or whatever, or I was an idiot when I was younger and I got to a certain age and I made a lifestyle change. So therefore I am where I am now.
Isn't it to be human that we're good at risk management, or bad at it, or whatever we want to see it? We play a game of risk management. You know, when we're 20, we don't really see what we think 40 is years away. When you're 40, you think 60 is years away.
Yeah.
You know, obviously perception of time changes as you age and things, you know, the years pass quicker. But, you know, I definitely think people are willing to err on the side that they don't do anything thinking they can fix it later. It's just a managing of risk, and there's loads of risk at the moment. You know, there's COVID risks, there's this risks. I mean, people are playing risk, this game of risk all the time, and they don't see their health as a pressing issue, or even. And we were talking. You two sent me a message today about a pill to help curb hunger.
I saw that on the BBC News this morning, and I was just like, another one. Like, really? Do we need more of this stuff, or do we need to just get the message to people? Because it says, it's a new injection or something you can get for obesity to promote fat loss. But it says if it's used in conjunction with a healthy lifestyle, then you'll get the thing. So if you've let yourself get obese, but then you change your lifestyle and have this treatment, whatever it is, then you'll lose like 5 stone. You'll get back to where you are, and then you carry on your healthy lifestyle, and you're away. The chances of someone who's let themselves get that obese of being able to change their lifestyle within the framework of losing that 5 stone with a pill is very slim. Is very unlikely. I'll use a different word, shall I? Is very unlikely, isn't it? And that's the whole thing. But if you can make that lifestyle change, then you don't need the pill anyway, do you?
But if you're gambling, which I think a lot of people do, they gamble. They say, if weight loss equals health, and technology allows me to gamble with less odds, you know, where you're more likely to win. Like, I can just take a pill. Like, I know I'm going to work my ass off. I'm going to not take care of myself because it's not priority at the moment. But in 5 years, they're going to have a pill. I'll take that. I'll lose a load of weight and I'll be healthy. Sometimes people are willing to take that gamble. And I think that's kind of, we're in an interesting stage at the moment. So when you're talking about let's be healthy for 80, it takes a forward-thinking mindset to do that. And I suppose your job is to educate people on how do they project themselves into the future.
Yeah. Helping them look at the longer term. Yeah.
And I think you said, like you spoke near the start, the fact that if a 20-year-old's coming to you, the chances of them coming to you with that foresight is very limited. It's more about, I'm going to Ibiza in 6 months or 3 months. I want to get really good. Whereas a 40-year-old is, you know, without wanting to sound morbid, nearer to the finish line. Do you know what I mean? So
easy, mate.
We're at that stage. But you become, you know, the nearer you get to the finish line, the more you value the time that you've got left. It's human.
Do I get a gold medal at the finish line?
No, just the needs wants differential. It basically goes like this. The older you get, the closer you become to what you actually need versus just what you want.
Well, sorry, go on.
This brings me back to what you were talking about earlier, actually, because I'd written it down because you were talking about, like, you know, being in the Marines and all that sort of stuff, and then, you know, it was a different mindset when you were there. You were obviously younger as well, and now you're a bit older, and you've changed the way you do things many times over the years. But you were saying, like, you might train someone who has been in the military their whole life, and then the company are broken and knackered and all that, and then you've got to try and change the way they train. But it's not about, it'll not be about the way they train, it'll be about the way they think about training. So you've got to change the mindset, right? Which is a huge deal. And this comes into the nutrition thing as well, and the lifestyle thing. So how do you, and Paul's just asked this question as well, but where do you begin with that? How do you start with that? How do you convince, because you've got to gain their trust and convince them that the way they've been doing it is fine, but it's got them to where they are now. Yeah. It got them the purpose, but how do you change? Like, because it's like a complete reversal for most people, isn't it?
Yeah. It's okay. So to begin with, like I already mentioned, they're coming to me because they're already buying into a certain degree about what I'm selling, as in movement and longevity. So it's not like I'm trying to convince, like, to be honest, anybody that doesn't care about movement, I'm not even going to bother working with them. But yeah, on my remote coaching books at the moment, I got one UK Special Forces guys and 2 US Special Forces guys. One is in their late 30s, the other 2 are in their early 40s. And they've come to me because they want to extend their career within Special Forces. Now, I know the way that these guys like to train. They like to train hard, intensely, but at the same time, they're also really good at doing what I tell them to do. You know, they're basically the highest compliant clients I've ever had. It's just tick, 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 everything. And they're always like, oh, yes, great, Phil. It's like, okay, cool. So, and the key is sprinkling in things that I know that they love and things that I know that they're going to get really excited about. And okay, they're dudes. So if you can put on a little bit of shoulder girth at the same time, then that's also going to keep them interested. But at the same time, sprinkling in lots of movement. So active recovery is a huge part. So if you're doing close to maximal intensity for strength repetitions or hypertrophy repetitions, instead of hanging around looking at your phone for 2 minutes, you could be doing a highly valuable mobility exercise, which I always tell them is more valuable than the exercise itself. Every session starts with minimum 10 minutes, normally 15 to 20 of movement, because I learned this one from Dan John. If it's important, you do it first. So movement is important. You put movement at the beginning of every session, and then you sprinkle in the highest value movements that I can possibly put in between the things that they love doing. So something that they'll love doing, pretty much anything that builds up a sweat, raises the heart rate, and makes people feel their booties. Pretty much most people are going to enjoy that sort of thing. Obviously, you have to change workout prescription depending on kind of people's preferences and everything like that. But yeah, I think working in movement for active recovery is a huge part of it. Yeah,
that's just. I did the gymnastic bodies program for a while, for about 8 months.
You can tell.
Yeah, well, you know, but I know it was really. Thank you.
You can tell by the way you sit.
Yeah. It's a bit. Oh God. Anyway, yeah. So no, basically his system is you do your strength exercise for whatever reps was prescribed, and then you fit a mobility one in between, and basically superset that. Yeah. And that had great value. I learned a lot from doing that, and it was very disciplined. I mean, there wasn't much variety, but it was very disciplined, and I quite liked it, quite enjoyed it. And I did feel pretty good doing those workouts. You know, and it's
so every single set is exactly that. You know, you might have a strength circuit that involves maybe half kneeling press, a swings, and a squat pattern, and then straight after that, you go into laying on the floor sideline twists if somebody's got T-spine issues. I know so this is leading into litmus tests now. I know that we're probably looking to wrap up soon because we've hit an hour.
We'll wrap up. But we can always get you back on again, Phil, in the future and move on to...
I'd love to, because I think this is super important, is all cases coming from an injury therapist background, in all cases of shoulder injuries, in that case, if you test somebody's thoracic spine movement, then there's a restriction in their thoracic spine. In all cases of stiff thoracic spines, there's also a dysfunctional diaphragm. So, and there are these patterns that I've seen throughout all of my years in movement and rehab, that I've seen so many times that it's easy to come up with litmus tests like, okay, so how do you know what that exercise should be after somebody's done their deadlifts? Well, some people might be in the thoracic spine category. Some people might be in the hip category. Some people might be in the ankle category. Some people might just need overall stability and they might do better with rolling. So all that comes into play when with assessments. But yeah, it's kind of a big meaty subject, but I'd love to go into it in more detail another time. But yeah, in all cases of knee injuries is a foot that doesn't work beneath it. So I'm not saying this is the cause, but in all cases of knee injuries, if you spend a lot of time doing foot waking work, foot stability work, foot mobility work, ankle mobility work, a lot of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time, that knee injury goes away. Above the knee, you've got another highly mobile hip joint. And in all cases of knee injuries, again, you've got hip dysfunction. So start getting the hips to move well, and generally the hinge joint that is the knee fixes itself. Same thing with the lower back. You've got a hip and a spine, a T-spine above it. Get those two working, lower back tends to fix itself. Obviously that comes with movement pattern training as well. But anyway, going a bit too deep.
We will definitely get you back on and kind of open up with that subject and use that for the whole thing. But I just thank you for spending so much time with us. And we've gone obviously over the hour a little bit, and Paul was late as well, so he's got a full hour with you anyway.
You're never going to let that lie, are you? I mean, to be fair,
talking about this, in our 10th anniversary podcast. Remember that time?
We have a shared diary. Need a shared diary.
There's some real takeaways there. Some things that are just kind of prominent in my mind for a lot of listeners. The big value of movement-based training and training for strength, the way that your body moves is massive. The whole section that you talked about with offset loading. I mean, those of us on the podcast here have all heard of that before, but I think for most people, most kind of general gym goers, they never would have even thought of, picking up. I think I've even seen someone before. I was doing something and someone actually came up and said, do you realize if you pick them up accidentally, one's a different weight to that, because people just wouldn't think of having two different weight dumbbells or two different weight kettlebells. So, I mean, that's massive as well. There's so much in there for the listeners to go back and listen to and digest and real practical gems, which you've brought to us. So thank you so much for spending that time with us today, Phil. I'll just go and say, is there anything that the guys want to finish with? Peter, any questions or any comments?
I haven't got any questions. I've got lots, but we'll keep that for the next time. But I'm just waiting for Paul's Jerry Springer final thoughts.
No, let's put you in spot now.
We need to go over to Paul.
Have you prepared your final thought?
My final thoughts of the day. No, it's just it's just great to see Phil again, really.
Yeah, it's really good to see you too.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't know if you covered this right at the beginning of the talk. We all kind of train in the in a kettlebell cert together, and I remember Phil was using the 40 kilogram kettlebell when he was doing his 10-minute swing test, and that looked pretty tough. I was just getting through with the 32 and just about made it on my hair and my skin on my teeth. It's a pleasure to actually talk to you. How do we find out about what you do? Do you have websites? I mean, how do people get in touch?
You can go to my website, philipmcdougall.com. That's one L in Philip, two L's in McDougall, McDougal.
We'll put a link to that in the post when we put it out. Yeah, we'll put a link to the website. Yeah.
Or you get me on Instagram, phil.mcdougall.
So they can do online training as well as in-person training.
I do, but I'm actually maxed out.
He doesn't want any more people. He said that at the start. If you've been in one time, Paul.
You have to die in order to. Someone has to die before they go.
I'm the way that I do it is very bespoke, and it's highly tailored. I don't do cookie cutter because everybody moves differently, and I honestly don't know how people do online cookie cutter type programs. But I do most of my blog writing for Kettlebell Kings. So I've just submitted a new one to Kettlebell Kings, which is basically consists of all of my favorite 20-minute workouts. So that one should be coming out soon. But yeah, feel free to get in touch, and I will do my best to answer any quick questions. But sometimes people ask me really long, meaty questions and people I've never met before, in which case the answer is always, thanks for asking the question. I'll be sure to write a blog about it at some point in the future.
And maybe we can put a link as well, Pete, to the blog, the one about building
functional mass,
wasn't it?
Yeah, how to build functional mass. It's really, I think if you just put how to build functional mass into Google, that'll just come straight up because it's at the top.
That's right. So I remember you one of the sessions, one of the workshops you did for us at Unique Results previously was the kettlebell complexes one with the double bells, which was all offset bells, which was a fantastic, really fantastic day's learning. That was great. So brilliant. Well, what we've got,
and Phil, have you got any requests for where I go walking after lockdown? Because I keep sending pictures of like Sugarloaf and Skirrid and that, and you're like, oh, home. Oh, keep sending me pictures of home.
Got the Blorange?
Sorry?
The Blorange.
You mentioned that one. I'm going to have to do
It's like less than a mile, but it's my favorite because I live just close to there, and you park down at the bottom and you just get up as fast as you can. I think my best ever is 28 minutes. So you can try and get up there faster than 28 minutes.
I'll race. I've got a spaniel called Sid. I'll race him up there and see if he can do it in better than 28 minutes.
Fantastic. So we will say then, we will wrap up now. Do you want to say goodbye, Pete?
Goodbye, Pete.
You want to say goodbye, Paul?
Goodbye.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Phil. We'll arrange another session for you to come on with us in the next sort of month or so. That'd be great. And thank you so much. And goodbye, everyone. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, make sure you share this with friends. And that is the 25th episode. We'll be back next week for the 26th episode with, I think,
Paul Gray
on the 26th episode. So we will see you next week. We've got loads of good guests lined up all through March. Thank you for listening, and ta-ta.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant, Paul Bassett, and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Oddity.